The USS Cyclops left Barbados in March of 1918, carrying more than 300 men, and was never seen again. No distress signal, no wreckage. And it happened in the Bermuda Triangle. The data closed the mystery decades ago. The answer should have been enough. It wasn't. Section 1. The Incidents. In the early 1600s, an English ship called the Sea Venture was caught in a hurricane off the island chain of Bermuda. The storm wrecked the vessel and stranded its crew on Bermuda. The sailors had set out to resupply the failing colony at Jamestown. The shipwreck is widely believed to have inspired Shakespeare's The Tempest. In the play, Bermuda is a cursed place. The triangle had its reputation long before it had a name. Over the following centuries, ships crossing that stretch of ocean encountered the same conditions: unpredictable currents, sudden weather, the disorientation of sailing through water where hurricanes form without warning. Some did not make it. The toll accumulated in shipping registers, naval reports, and sailors' folklore. No one had drawn a pattern yet. Then came the Cyclops. The ship was a U.S. Navy coal carrier, built to fuel warships. The Cyclops departed Rio de Janeiro in February 1918, stopped in Salvador to load manganese ore, made an unscheduled stop in Barbados, and turned north toward Baltimore. The ship carried a radio. No distress signal was ever sent. The Navy launched an extensive search and found nothing. President Woodrow Wilson later stated that only God and the sea knew what had happened. In 1941, two of her sister ships also vanished. No one connected the disappearances to a location. Not yet. On the 5th of December 1945, 14 men boarded 5 TBM Avenger torpedo bombers at Naval Air Station Fort Lauderdale for a routine navigation exercise over the Bahamas. The flight leader was Lieutenant Charles Taylor. 90 minutes in, another instructor flying in the area overheard Taylor on the radio. Taylor sounded confused. Both his compasses had failed. He couldn't confirm his position. The tower urged him to switch to the emergency frequency. Taylor refused. All 5 planes were on the same channel. It was the only link holding the formation together. Switching would let Taylor talk to the ground, but he would lose contact with the 4 planes flying behind him. Over the next several hours, the transmissions broke apart. Fragments of disagreement between pilots, long gaps of static, voices fading in and out as the aircraft moved farther from land. A rescue aircraft with 13 crew launched that evening. 23 minutes later, the crew of the tanker SS Gaines Mills watched a fireball drop from the sky and burn on the surface for 10 minutes. The captain circled the area with searchlights and passed through a slick of oil and aviation fuel. He found no survivors. The Navy concluded the rescue plane had exploded in midair. No wreckage from any of the 6 aircraft was ever recorded. One account from the investigation said the pilots had vanished as though they had flown to Mars. The Navy searched over 250,000 square miles and published a 500-page report. It explained nothing. For the investigators, Flight 19 was an unsolved case. For everyone else, it was the beginning of a legend. The incidents kept coming. In January 1948, a British passenger aircraft carrying around 30 people vanished on a flight from the Azores to Bermuda. 1 year later, a second British aircraft, a similar model, disappeared on a flight from Bermuda to Kingston, Jamaica. Neither plane was ever found. No distress call from either. No trace of either. The incidents shared a stretch of ocean, but that stretch of ocean had no name. In 1964, that changed. Section 2. The Myth. An American writer named Vincent Gaddis published an article in Argosy magazine. It drew a triangle, Florida, Bermuda, Puerto Rico, and named it the Bermuda Triangle. Gaddis argued that the number of disappearances within that boundary represented more than coincidence. For the first time, the public had a shape to point to. That shape proved sufficient. The triangle had been named at the height of the Cold War, when the appetite for hidden forces ran deep. 10 years later, A single book turned a pattern into a phenomenon and built most of its case on distortion. In 1974, Charles Berlitz published a book titled The Bermuda Triangle. It sold 20 million copies across more than 30 languages. Berlitz proposed that the triangle was connected to the lost city of Atlantis, and that the absence of distress calls meant extraterrestrial interference. The book presented all of this as fact. It also cited incidents that turned out to be explainable or outside the triangle's boundaries, or entirely fabricated. In 1977, Steven Spielberg put Flight 19 in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. In the film, the missing Avengers turn up intact in a desert. Their pilots walk off an alien mothership. After that, the public couldn't think about Flight 19 without thinking about aliens. Some of the cases the book cited were old legends. Others were invented from scratch. The Ellen Austen, one of the most repeated triangle stories, describes a crewless ship drifting in the triangle in 1881. No contemporary record of the incident has ever been found. The earliest trace of the story dates to a book published in 1943. Or the VA Fog, a tanker that one triangle author claimed had vanished with all hands, except for the captain, who was found sitting at his desk, clutching a coffee cup. The U.S. Coast Guard photographed the wreck and recovered several bodies. The ship had exploded and sunk off the coast of Texas. It was never anywhere near the Bermuda Triangle. In 1975, a research librarian named Larry Cushy published The Bermuda Triangle Mystery Solved. Cushy had started investigating because students at Arizona State University kept asking him about it. He assumed the mystery was real. Then he started requesting records from the Coast Guard, from the Air Force, Lloyd's of London, newspaper archives on microfilm. What he found was a pattern in the reporting itself. Berlitz had listed a plane as vanished when it had crashed off Daytona Beach in front of hundreds of witnesses. He had placed a shipwreck in the Atlantic when the ship had actually sunk in the Pacific. Cushy's conclusion? The Bermuda Triangle was a manufactured mystery, built from sloppy research, exaggerated claims, and missing context. Section 3. The theories. One theory. Compasses behave unusually in the triangle, disorienting navigators. Compasses do not point to geographic north, but accounting for that variation is standard procedure on every route, in every ocean. It was standard procedure in 1945. Rogue waves are real, capable of reaching 80 feet or more with no warning, leaving no time for a distress signal and no predictable debris field. They also occur in every deep ocean basin in the world. Applying them to the triangle specifically requires proof they concentrate there, and none exists. The Gulf Stream runs along the western edge of the triangle at speeds reaching 4 to 5 knots, 150 times the flow of the Amazon River. A debris field entering that current can be displaced hundreds of miles within days. A search at the last known position becomes useless. Some researchers propose that methane hydrate deposits on the seafloor could erupt without warning, reducing water density enough to sink a ship, or disrupting the air above enough to down an aircraft. It is a testable theory. There's no documented record of active methane hydrate venting in the Bermuda Triangle. Which raises the same question every one of these explanations runs into. Why the Bermuda Triangle specifically? If rogue waves, magnetic variation, and extreme weather all occur in dozens of other ocean regions with comparable traffic and comparable history, why does the triangle have a mythology and those regions do not? Because there was nothing out of the norm to explain. Section 4. The data. If the triangle was a predator, it would show up in the data. It doesn't. The U.S. Coast Guard maintains a marine casualty database covering more than 3 decades and 150,000 maritime incidents. Of the 9,000 that warranted detailed analysis, 361 fell inside the triangle's claimed boundaries, 4% of global casualties in a region representing between 2 and 5% of the world's navigable ocean surface. The rate matched the global baseline. The triangle showed no unusual pattern of disappearances. Lloyd's of London is the world's oldest insurance market. the institution that has underwritten risk at sea since the 1680s. If a stretch of ocean is dangerous, Lloyd's knows, because Lloyd's pays. When a British television documentary asked Lloyd's whether an unusual number of ships had sunk in the Bermuda Triangle, they investigated and said no. Lloyd's does not charge higher premiums for vessels passing through the area. The market that prices risk for a living priced the Bermuda Triangle at 0. The U.S. Board on Geographic Names doesn't recognize the Bermuda Triangle as an official location. The place does not formally exist, but the data still had an answer for the triangle's most famous incident. As for Flight 19, some researchers argue Taylor had a history of disorientation in the air. Taylor was southeast of Florida. His transmission said southwest. He flew east. His aircraft ran out of fuel over the open Atlantic. He was lost. By the time the error was understood, there was no fuel left to correct it. The triangle had no anomaly, but the data pointed somewhere. Section 5. The real danger. What does appear in the record? For the past decade, the South China Sea, the Indonesian archipelago, and the Philippine Sea have ranked as the deadliest maritime regions on the planet. The Strait of Malacca alone funnels roughly a quarter of the world's seaborne trade through a channel that narrows to under 2 miles. Vessels share that space with active piracy, unpredictable weather, and some of the most complex navigation on Earth. Almost no one outside the insurance industry discusses it. The Bermuda Triangle sits in the North Atlantic, adjacent to the United States, in an ocean loaded with centuries of European maritime storytelling. The South China Sea sits elsewhere. That difference is storytelling. The anomaly was closed. The answer should have been enough. It wasn't. The question that remained was about the people, not the location. Section 6. The reason. Return to the USS Cyclops, a steel warship the length of 2 city blocks, more than 300 men. No SOS, no wreckage, still missing. More than 300 families were left with the same 2 words, cause unknown. The record cannot give them the one thing every one of them needed, a reason. The Cyclops was built to carry coal. On her final voyage, she carried manganese ore, denser, heavier, and prone to shifting inside holds designed for a lighter load. When wet manganese ore turns to heavy mud that shifts with the ship's movement, the ship's starboard engine had a cracked cylinder. She was loaded past the safety line on her hull, the mark that showed when a ship is carrying too much weight. And the only officer aboard who knew how to store manganese had been arrested and confined to his quarters after a dispute with the captain. 2 sister ships vanished in the same waters 23 years later, both carrying heavy metallic ore. A rear admiral later suggested the I-beams running the length of the ship had eroded, leaving a structural weakness at the center. The manganese, the dead engine, the arrested officer, the overloaded hull. Then the current carried whatever remained beyond reach. The record has an answer. The answer is insufficient. 300 people deserve something larger than bad luck and fast current. The triangle was named because naming it served a purpose. It converted individual tragedies into evidence of a larger force. The Cyclops became its largest entry, a ship that most likely failed in a storm and sank. Everyone aboard vanished from the surface of the sea and left nothing behind. They were lost at sea, just like the sailors from every ocean in the world. The myth gave those losses a cause. The data gave them a classification. The disaster still happened. Saturation diving keeps divers pressurized for weeks at a time, their bodies slowly adjusting to the same conditions as the sea floor. On the 5th of November, 1983, aboard the Byford Dolphin oil rig in the North Sea, a pressurized diving chamber burst open. It had not been depressurized. One diver was forced through a 24-inch gap in the chamber floor. His body was essentially turned inside out. That story is on screen now. Subscribe to discover more mysteries below the blue. See you in the deep.